You're gonna have the fear of failure because you want everything, but it's not because you want everything. It's because when do you want everything? That's what the fear of failure comes from. It's not because I want everything. That could be motivation. That could be inspiration. I want the world title. I want the massage therapist. I want all these cameras. I want them. It's okay to want them, but when do you want them and how do you think you'll get them is a whole different story. But how you will get them and when you want them is what brings the fear of failure. Welcome to another episode of the Inner Guidebook. I'm your host, Saudi professional boxer Ziyad Almaayouf, and I'm accompanied by none other than Yusuf Sabri, entrepreneur.
5-0 Haboub, 5-0. You forgot to say that. 5-0 undefeated debut Haboub.
Yes.
Thank you.
If you are new to the Inner Guidebook, you know this is Saudi's first ever English solo podcast. But for the time being, it is not a solo podcast anymore. Not for now.
Just for Ramadan.
Just for Ramadan, the Ramadan series. It's not going to be a solo podcast. I needed another mind better than mine, just like mine. And just to bring more value, to talk and go deeper and deeper. And
honestly, today I'm coming to learn from you, bro. I'm coming to learn from you today, my friend.
We go deep with psychology.
Yeah.
We go deep with our experiences, if it's through being an entrepreneur, through being an athlete. And I don't think there's anything deeper than today's topic, because so many people go through what I'm about to speak on, and so many people go through it knowing what it is, and so many more people go through it not knowing what it is. They feel it and they don't know how to describe it. They don't know what it really is. And today's topic of the Inner Guidebook
and not only that, Ziyad, you're going to give practical tips and practical homework to do to work on these things.
Exactly that. And today's topic of the Inner Guidebook is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a heavy topic. It's a vulnerable topic, a deep topic, and I want to first, just to begin with, touch on what is imposter syndrome, how you feel when you're going through imposter syndrome and what it starts with, and to really summarize it or to start with it by long story short, imposter syndrome is the feeling of being a fraud. Right? Imposter syndrome is the feeling of thinking you are a fraud on your own journey, and it is really deeply caused by not being able to internalize your emotions, internalize your success, internalize your journey. And what I mean by that is, who are you doing it for? Who are you focusing on? Who are you listening to? And who are you really caring for? Who are you compassionate about? And so on and so on.
Very different episode and topic than our first podcast together. The last, I really enjoyed the last podcast, Zizu. We talked about passion and purpose.
Yeah, I think this is the complete Uno reverse card.
yeah,
the complete opposite.
So why did you pick this topic, Zizu, right after this last podcast?
Because with purpose and passion will come imposter syndrome.
Okay.
It goes hand in hand with perfectionism. And that's what imposter syndrome is. You can't expect to chase the passion, chase the purpose like we spoke about during the first episode, and not expect imposter syndrome. And the feelings that you develop from imposter syndrome, it's the self-doubt, the anxiety, the stress, the fear. These are all emotions we spoke about during our first episode of chasing your purpose and finding your passion. And these are all signs of imposter syndrome. So given if you go through imposter syndrome and you know it's imposter syndrome, today we will talk about how to go through it, how to handle it and manage it. But if you don't know what imposter syndrome is, but you're going through it after this episode, if you are going through it, you will know if you really are going through it or not, and if you are, how to deal with it and manage it as well.
Love it, bro. Bismillah.
So the first thing I want to speak about is what imposter syndrome does the most in every single situation, in every single idea you have, in every single thing you want to accomplish. What it really causes you to do is to question your abilities, right? You question your abilities, but most importantly, you question your abilities of the future. That's what people, I feel, don't understand the most. When they have that feeling of imposter syndrome, you feel like you're a fraud on your own journey, but it's because of the questioning of your abilities. But when you really go deep into it and you challenge those thoughts, you realize that you're questioning your abilities of the future. You're questioning abilities that you haven't yet put in the work to develop. You're questioning abilities that you haven't yet needed to even use, that you will still use in the future, but you're questioning them now. When you don't need them now, you're not using them now. Now is not the time to use it. So it's that feeling of, what am I gonna do when that point comes? What am I gonna do when what the people expect me to do, when that time comes, what am I gonna do then? How am I gonna do it then? I don't think I'm gonna do it then. You think you're not gonna do it then because you're not ready for it now. That's what imposter syndrome creates.
I have a random thought in my head. Do you think imposter syndrome applies more on highly successful people?
That's exactly it.
Like, because I feel the people that are not super successful and they know that they've put in the work and they're working, they're already a fraud. You know, especially now with the social media world and so on. You know, and I feel the people that are legit, you know, and I've heard like some of the biggest stars in every single field, they all have imposter syndrome.
This is it, because imposter syndrome stems from you know, four things that I really want to touch on. The first one being perfectionism, then comparison, then the fear of failure, and attribution.
It's in this order?
In this order, or in whatever
matter.
order. It's just it comes from these are four causes and triggers to it. When it's perfectionism, fear of failure, comparison, and attribution. All these points are all points that you are going to feel imposter syndrome once you start, you know, feeling these emotions. But when you said it's always related to the highly successful people, that's exactly what it is. Because when you feel imposter syndrome, that is the best thing you could feel when you're on your way to a successful journey. When you're on your way to a big, risky journey, or a journey that's never done before. And why I say never done before is because imposter syndrome means you are on the road. Imposter syndrome means you are on the road that is less walked. So that's what imposter syndrome is. When you feel imposter syndrome, you are walking on a road that is less walked. Why? Because you have no blueprint. You have no yellow brick road. You have no evidence that will assure you that you are going to succeed. You have no evidence that will assure you that you should succeed. And that is where imposter syndrome really stems from. So when you feel imposter syndrome, know that you are doing the right thing, because you are on the road that is less walked. You are on a road that not many others have walked, but very few have walked that road. You know, not a lot of people walk. It's not the safest road. It's not the most assuring road. You know, it's not. And when I say that, I don't mean in general. Sometimes I just mean from the people you know, from the people you were brought up with, from people from your family or from your circle of friends. It's not in general being the first ever to do something or the first ever to do this, accomplish this, and that's what you're trying to do. What I mean is you're the first one from your family to do it. Or you're even the second one from your family to do it. Or you're the first one from your friends to do it. The second or third one from your friends to do it. You know, so first one from your country, or just go more micro. So like I said, I want to touch on these 4 points. And the first cause of imposter syndrome and a trigger of it will be perfectionism. Once you start wanting to once you start feeling the need to be perfect in everything, that's where you kind of feel like I'm an imposter, because you feel the need to hit all these points, don't you think?
And what is perfect? Like, I'm just like, what is perfect?
Exactly.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Exactly. And based on what?
Yeah.
What are you basing it on? And who are you basing it on? And why are you basing it on that person? And that brings us to another point, right? We said comparison is another trigger and cause for imposter syndrome. So aside from the fact of why are you comparing yourself on your own journey to someone else on their journey, how are you doing it? And to what reason and to what extent, and all these things are all causes again and triggers of imposter syndrome. So we go back to perfectionism now. Why feel the need to be perfect? And when I say that it makes it stems, it causes imposter syndrome, or it triggers imposter syndrome, not when you want to be perfect or you feel like you should be perfect on a given night or at a given moment. It's when you feel the need to be perfect every single day. That's what causes and triggers imposter syndrome. When you feel every single moment, every single day, every single test, every single step on your journey, you need to be perfect. That's what makes you doubt yourself. That's what makes you start feeling like you're a fraud, because it's a very unrealistic thing to expect. It's a very unrealistic thing to expect that I'm going to be perfect today, tomorrow, next week, and the week after. When I'm in camp,
I was just about to ask, does it happen in training?
All the time. So it's a 2-month camp. It's a 2-month training camp for each fight before you fight. So you train for minimum 8 weeks before you fight, one night for 45 minutes. And
every day?
Every single, 6 days a week.
6 days a week, 1 day off.
So if you feel the need to be perfect every single day, you won't be perfect every single day. So if you put up the expectations that you need to be perfect every single day, you won't be perfect every single day. And even worse, you will start doubting yourself more, having more anxiety, more stress, more pressure, and more of that feeling of being a fraud when you realistically don't become perfect every day. And so I was speaking to my coach last camp. The first 2 weeks when we started sparring, for anyone that doesn't know, sparring is the matches we do in training, and it's something known, for general knowledge, that the matches in training are a lot harder than the real fight, because it's what prepares you to the fight. And also it's a lot harder than the real fight because you're still building and bringing back your reflexes, your speed, your stamina, your power, and you're working on something specific each camp, something you're uncomfortable with, trying to become comfortable with. So when you're working on something you're uncomfortable with, trying to become comfortable with, and you're expecting to be perfect every day, it's not going to work. So when we were speaking, my coach and I, last camp, the first 2 weeks, I was really good. I was doing good. And when I say I was really good, I mean I was improving every single session. I was doing better and better every single sparring session that we did, every single match we did. And what happened is week 3 and 4, I started doing...
You're exhausted.
Yeah, exactly. I started doing a little, or the progress started dropping. The improvements started dropping, and it started becoming harder, and I started doing not as good as I was the first 2 weeks. And I told my coach, I told him, why do I feel like I'm taking steps backwards? And he told me, this is the thing. He said, from the outside, you're not. He said, you're not taking step backwards. You're being too hard on yourself. And this is a point I'm going to touch on later. Compassion and self-compassion is such an important part to imposter syndrome. He said you're not being too hard on yourself. He said you're not taking a step backwards. You're being too hard on yourself. That's one. The second thing is, if you were perfect every single day, I'd be worried. That's what he said. He said, so when you become perfect every single day, when you improve every single day, that's when I'll be worried. So the fact that you are not perfect every day, the fact that you are not being excellent every day, and you are not at your best every single day, then I know you're human. But if you weren't like that, I'd be like, something is wrong with him. Something isn't right. Either the training is too easy, the matches are too easy, or he's not human.
Yeah.
So because you are human, you cannot expect to be perfect at every single moment. And when I say that, it's okay to expect to be perfect on a given night.
For sure.
When fight night comes, I expect to be perfect. I want to be perfect. I need to be perfect. But why? Because I've put in 2 months of work that has prepared me for that moment. I've already put in the work. I've already put in the time, the training, building my stamina, building my speed, my power, so I didn't spend 8 weeks of training to not be perfect on that given night.
100%.
So I expect myself to be perfect that given night. It's okay to feel pressure, anxiety, stress, and all those emotions, but not the feeling of being a fraud, because I'm prepared. So try to not feel the need to be perfect every single day. Take it day by day. Stay in the present. And that's what moves us to comparison. Comparison is an idea I like to speak about a lot, because I talk about micro comparison and macro comparison. And from one, you can take inspiration, and from one, you can take, deterioration. Let's call it like that. Okay, so from...
As soon as I hear the word comparison, I think social media. And social media and just people's mental getting destroyed.
So being in social media, what do you think about the comparison part, and the part of being an imposter, feeling imposter syndrome, being around that field, especially with you doing what you're doing, and in a very competitive field of podcasting and podcasters, and if it's the media agency and all of that, how do you then manage the comparison and try to avoid that imposter syndrome, feeling like, what am I doing? Am I really doing it?
For sure. So I actually I got into a hole at some point, because I was comparing myself to guys that are super, super high level, and they're pumping a lot more content than me. And I was really upset. I was always like, how am I not putting as much content as them? I have to do blah, 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 blah. And then it was a very simple answer. These guys are spending like $100,000 a month on their just social media teams. I'm spending like not even like 2% of that. Not 2%, but let's say 5%, 10% of what they're spending. They're spending $100,000. So I feel like you need to compare yourself properly. It's good to motivate yourself and so on. So, and the other thing that I just want to touch on, Zizo, especially with social media right now, it's, and I have a lot of young kids that are like, Yusuf, this guy raised this much money. This guy is doing this. This guy is doing that. This guy is doing this. And they're comparing themselves. They're still super young, but they don't understand the data. I'm like, bro, why? I'm like, first of all, why did he need to raise money? He's not able to make his company cash flow positive enough, and he's not even, or he wants to scale to that. I'm like, the point is, you don't know what's his real situation that he raised money.
Exactly.
I'm like,
that.
He's in the negatives right now. I'm like, understand what's going on, or they see someone else that every social media post looks amazing, and they don't know if he's positive in terms of ROI on what he's doing or not. Or he doesn't know if the clothes he's getting is rented from a company. There's so much data that's missing when you're comparing yourself. Faddal, Mr. Zizous.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. The data that's missing. And that's why I'm saying how you're comparing yourself with them will determine on exactly what you take from them. So one kind of comparison will bring inspiration, and the other will bring deterioration. And what I mean by that, I want to explain micro and macro comparison.
Okay.
Micro comparison is when you take the small inspirational stuff when you take the small attributions of someone successful, the small attributions of someone who's already made it, the small details of why they made it, and you take that as inspiration. Once you start trying to take the macro details, the macro pictures and attributions they have of why they made it, that brings deterioration, and that brings that feeling of imposter syndrome, that feeling of being a fraud. So for example, Yusuf Sabri has his own podcast, Ziyad Almaayouf has his own podcast. I'm still starting, I have X amount of followers. But you've been in the game for some time, you have X amount of followers, right? Micro inspiration I'm taking from you is the enthusiasm when you speak. Micro inspiration, micro comparison I'm gonna take from you is the enthusiasm you have when you speak, and that's inspiration. That gives me inspiration. I want to do the next episode with that much enthusiasm. Micro inspiration, the mic you use. I want to work so hard to bring that mic, a realistic comparison where I could get to that mic, right? Micro inspiration again.
Very attainable.
Exactly. Micro inspiration, how sharp you look on a podcast, what you're wearing.
That's
you
you,
know,
Haboob.
That's you. The fashion is you, bro. But I'm saying it's the small comparisons of what are they doing at the highest level. What is he still, the small things you're focusing on at the highest level of a podcast. Okay, then I know on my own podcast, I want to dress good each episode. I want to, bring that much enthusiasm when I'm speaking, break the fourth wall sometimes with the audience watching, have that mic next episode instead of the small mics I have, and so on and so on. That brings inspiration. That gives me inspiration to work. That gives me inspiration to keep going, right? Macro comparison comes from, I want to have 3 sets. Yusuf Sabri has 3 podcast sets. I want to have these 3 sets now. How am I going to be successful without these 3 sets? Macro comparison comes from Yusuf Sabri is successful because he has 3 sets. I didn't even, like you said, I don't know what went on behind the scenes for you to get to the 3 sets. I don't know what you had to put, the work you had to put in to get to these 3 sets, but I'm going to macro comparison because this is the stuff you attain at the highest level, and that brings deterioration because you can't attain that at the beginner level, at the startup level.
Why do people go to the macro, you think?
It's because they want success and they want it quick. They want quick success. They want the end result and they don't want the journey.
And it's crazy when you said the 3 sets, it has nothing to do with 3 sets. You could do it in your bedroom.
Exactly.
And you could succeed even
Exactly. But
better.
from the outside, I'm telling you, if I'm going macro comparison, that's what I think it is. I think you're being successful because you have 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras, 2 mics, and that's why you're successful. Not because of the enthusiasm you bring or the notes you take on with your podcast or the guests you bring on. You know what I mean? So that's macro comparison. From macro comparison, you get deterioration. Micro comparison, you get inspiration. Micro comparison is stuff you will take from the person who's already made it to the highest level and will give you inspiration to keep going.
I feel a lot of fighters would fall into that, bro.
Exactly. Oh, definitely. A lot of fighters will do that because you will see the fighter with the titles and you will think he's successful and he has the titles because he has a chef in his camp, a nutritionist in his camp, a massage therapist in his camp, but you won't go to the micro comparison of the amount of work he had to put in, or how many hours of a day he trains, or the mental attitude he has in camp. How positive is he? Does he speak to a therapist? Does he speak to a mental performance coach? How does he work on his mental health? How many miles does he run? That's the micro comparison. Micro comparison gives you inspiration for the journey, and macro comparison gives you or you're trying to get inspiration for it for the end result. You can't aim to get inspiration for the end result. That's what creates imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome will stem from the wrong kind of comparison, the bad type of comparison, and now we've agreed that it's the macro type of comparison. And with macro comparison, when you start comparing yourself to the macro details of what somebody now has because of the micro stuff they did to get to that stuff, then you start wanting it so bad and wanting it so quick. And that brings me to my next point of imposter syndrome, and that's the fear of failure. Fear of failure is such a big player and such a big trigger and cause to imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Don't you think?
I'm waiting to hear from you, to be honest, Zizou. I'm blank on this one.
So with the fear of failure and what causes it or
because it's crazy. It's like you went from macro, I want everything, to I'm gonna fail. So why you want everything, bro?
Exactly.
Focus.
You're gonna have the fear of failure because you want everything, but it's not because you want everything. It's because when do you want everything? That's what the fear of failure comes from. It's not because I want everything. That could be motivation. That could be inspiration. I want the world title. I want the massage therapist. I want all these cameras. I want them. It's okay to want them, but when do you want them and how do you think you'll get them is a whole different story. But how you will get them and when you want them is what brings the fear of failure, right? If you, like you said, focus on the journey, right? You focus on the now, focus on the journey, that eliminates fear of failure. But because there is a fear of failure when you're on the road that is less walked, when there is a fear of failure because you are trying to be a high achiever, like you said, you're trying to be a perfectionist, or you are someone who is comparing yourself to A, B, and C, and you're comparing the wrong way, like we spoke about. This is what the fear of failure stems from. So the fear of failure is in itself described. It's just, having the fear of failing. But again, you never have the fear of failing now, in the present. You won't have that fear because in the present, in now, you are prepared.
Yes.
You are here today because you are prepared for today. You are at this moment, you are in this moment now because you are prepared for this moment today and now. But the fear of failure comes from the future. You are worried about failing in the future, and if you fail in the future, you won't be able to get to the further future of where you have all the stuff that you've wanted. You're afraid of not being able to achieve what you want in the future, and if you don't achieve what you want in the future you're thinking of, you won't go ahead to the further future and have even more, and the cameras, the sets, or the world titles, the nutritionists, the chefs. That's what the fear of failure stems from. And we see that around social media a lot, especially with the idea that social media always or majorly or more often than not portrays only the success.
Only success.
Only success, only the good, only the highs. So then when you portray and you teach people about success, the highs, the good stuff, then you get the fear of failure, not only because you want all that stuff, but because you don't think you'll be able to deal with the failure because these people haven't dealt with the failure. They don't show that part, so you feel like that's what success is. They haven't failed. They haven't dealt with the failure.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And I feel a lot of people when they talk to me they want to start a new business or a new project. That's the first thing that doesn't make them start. That's the first thing that doesn't make them start their podcast, to post their first social media post, So 100%. I personally, at that level, that's the thing. It's my fear of failure now. It's not that crazy anymore. It's not crazy. Like if I fail now, I'm going to probably lose money, lose some time. I'm going to have valuable lesson. But what I keep thinking is the fear of getting knocked out on the ring. Like
but wait, what are you going to tell the people who are going to say your fear of failure now is less than it was before because you have more of a net to fall back on now?
No,
you have more of a cushion.
It's actually I feel like the more that you grow and that you make more money, it depends on every personality depends on how you use your money and how you invest your money and how you play around and start different businesses. I'm very aggressive in what I do. You know, I'm very aggressive in my investment. I'm very aggressive in starting new businesses. It's just because I really enjoy doing it. So for me, the end result, it doesn't really matter. For me, it's all about the process, enjoying the process. And I've won enough in my life that in my head, I'm a winner. I don't think if this is going to fail. And if it does fail, there is huge lessons in that failure that's going to make me make more money. So I'm excited no matter what.
In your head, you're a winner.
I'm a winner, bro. You know, and I've proved it to myself so many times.
In your head, you're a winner. You've proved it to yourself.
100%.
That's the best thing when it comes to imposter syndrome, right? And I love that someone as successful as you are is talking
By the way, guys,
that
I'm
way.
really not successful.
No. But it's someone as successful as you are to people who are looking up to you that is speaking that way.
For sure.
I've proved it to myself, and in my head I'm successful. And that is another cause and trigger of imposter syndrome. And that's what I spoke about. One of the 4 is attribution. And what attribution is: dismissing your own success, dismissing what you've already achieved so far, what you're achieving right now, what you're achieving today. You're just dismissing that success.
Yeah.
You're forgetful of that success. You're forgetful of that journey. And you're only looking forward to what's next. That's a big problem of imposter syndrome, and a big problem that gets us, you know, dismissing the whole journey and not even enjoying the moments of the journey.
Very true.
So when you say, I've proved it to myself and I'm successful in my own head, that's because you haven't dismissed, or I would like to say, you've learned not to dismiss
but
your
this
own
is
success.
this is in a very specific things in starting businesses. But if you talk to me, for example, on creating content, no, I have a huge imposter syndrome, or giving courses. I'm like, no, I can't teach this. I don't I know it. I've done money in it, but I'm like, there's this guy that's done quadrillions more than me.
Exactly.
You know?
So when it comes to dismissing your own success, your own small step achievements leading up to the larger achievement, it's very important to keep sticking to those small steps. And I like to compare that by a heartbeat monitor, right? If the heartbeat monitor, and that ties with perfectionism as well, right? If you're perfect every day, that line is straight, steady and straight. And that, what happens to a heartbeat monitor when it's steady and straight?
You're dead, bro.
You're dead, right? If you're expecting yourself to be perfect every day, exciting every day, happy every day, good every day, and again, if you're always dismissing those small spikes that get you to that journey, then you are gonna fail at the end, right? So you can't dismiss those small spikes, and that's what attribution is. When you start dismissing them, you start feeling that imposter syndrome. You start getting that imposter syndrome because you are forgetful of why you're here, how you got here, the work you had to put to get here. You're dismissing of all that because you're looking forward to what's ahead. And what happens then is you don't enjoy the small moments of the small steps of the journey that you are taking, because you are always letting the size of the occasion get to you. You're always letting the size of the occasion put that much pressure, that much anxiety, that much fear, that much stress onto you, and you start feeling like a fraud for what's to come. You start feeling like a fraud now, and you're worried about what's to come, achieving what's to come. So you don't enjoy the moments. And I've been through a moment like that where I would sometimes finish fights, and because I would let the size of the occasion, right, being the first ever professional boxer from Saudi Arabia, being the first international one, the first global one on the global stage, I'm always fighting on the biggest cards, so every single fight is bigger than the other. And my development stage is in front of millions watching and thousands attending. And so I let the size of the occasion put so much pressure and stress and fear of failure and the comparisons and all of this. It puts that much on me, right? So then I don't enjoy the small moments. I don't enjoy every day of fight week. I don't enjoy the small media interviews. I've done an interview with Sky Sports Right now, I'm thinking about what am I going to say to Sky Sports? What are Sky Sports going to say about me? That's the size of the occasion. I've just done a radio interview with BBC. Now I'm worried about what are the people going to say when they listen to the radio interview with BBC? How is that going to affect their expectations of me going into the fight? So that's where you let the size of the occasion get to you and you don't enjoy the small moments of, I've done an interview with Sky Sports. I've done an interview with BBC Live. I spoke about...
huge by itself.
Exactly. I spoke about my childhood. I spoke about my upbringing. I spoke about my achievements. I've inspired people, this and that. So then I would watch my fights after they were done. I would watch the documentary clips or the documenting clips that we have after the fight is done, and I'd just laugh, enjoy them, smile. After my win, of course, after it's all said and done, I would laugh, enjoy them, and then I would live these moments. I would relive these moments. And then I started thinking to myself, how much better would have that moment been if the way I feel now would have been the way I felt then? How much better would have that moment been? If I'm smiling and I'm so happy now because I'm speaking to Andy Lee of Sky Sports, speaking to him about boxing, I'm happy, excited because I don't have the fears and these emotions, you know, the expectations, the pressures, the imposter syndrome. I'm enjoying it now because it's all not there. Instead of managing it when it's there, now it's all not there, so I'm enjoying it. So how much better would have this moment been? So then I started implementing that. Now I want to enjoy the moment today because of what's brought me to where I am today, and enjoy what I'm doing today because of how far I've come today. That's how you get rid of that attribution and deal with that.
Did you do it in your last fight, Zizou, or you're talking about your last fight?
Ever since my second fight,
okay,
my last fight, which is my fifth fight, it was the first time I do it again. My third fight, my fourth fight, all got to me.
Because it was a huge, this last fight was huge for you.
It was huge, but because it was huge, I want to enjoy it. Not because it was huge, it's gonna get to me.
But did it get to you? Like, did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the moments?
It got to me. No. The size of the occasion got to me when it's supposed to get to me.
Okay.
Fight night.
Okay.
So the pressure, the stress, the fear of failure, the imposter syndrome, the comparisons, everything came fight night, and that's natural. That's okay. That's okay. That's where you expect these emotions. But fight week, I wanted to enjoy everything.
Love it.
I wanted to, and
we saw it on your social media.
Exactly. You know, I'm just like, it's bringing back that smiling, that happy energy. You know, I'm living my dream. Go back to 10-year-old Zizo. Tell him you're gonna be signed with Anthony Joshua's management and Anthony Joshua himself. Tell 10-year-old Zizo you're gonna be sitting with Anthony Joshua discussing mental health, discussing pressure, stress, talking to him ringside. You know, go back to 10-year-old Zizo. Tell him you're gonna be on the undercard of AJ Nagano, Usyk Dubois, AJ Usyk, AJ Franklin, Paul Fury. Go back to 10-year-old Zizo and tell him that. So I wanted to enjoy these moments, right? So, but with that much success early on comes a lot more imposter syndrome, and that's another point that I'll touch on now. Is the early success, even if you deserve it, even if you've worked for it, or even if you're just blessed with it and it's what God has written for you, imposter syndrome will come with that high levels of success that I'm talking about, where it's in front of thousands, millions watching, thousands attending, people's opinions, people saying this, that, and you're performing on the big stage. You know, imposter syndrome is gonna really stem from that as well.
Love it.
And for this point, going into how imposter syndrome is gonna really be created under that early success, if you're doing something big, or if it's in front of a lot of people, and so on and so on. I want to start with a quote that will kick it off.
I love your quotes.
And it says, "You are not a fraud. You are a work in progress, constantly evolving and growing into your fullest potential." So it starts by, you are not a fraud. Just let's get that straight. You are not a fraud. You are a work in progress, constantly evolving and growing into the fullest potential.
Love it.
So with that idea, I want to talk about 3 ways that we could challenge imposter syndrome. 3 ways that will really get you overcoming. I wouldn't want to say eliminating imposter syndrome, but I want to say overcoming imposter syndrome. And that
I feel imposter. Sorry, Zero, to cut you off. I feel you can't eliminate it. I feel it's something like stress or anxiety that just comes and goes.
you can't completely eliminate imposter syndrome unless you stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you want to eliminate imposter syndrome, the only way to eliminate imposter syndrome is if you stop what you're doing. But if you stop what you're doing,
Quit.
then imposter syndrome is your life. You are a fraud, right? Imposter syndrome is just the feeling of being a fraud, but you are not a fraud. But if you quit what you're doing, which is a way to feel or think like you're eliminating imposter syndrome, then you are a fraud. You are a fraud because you quit. You are a fraud because you didn't handle it, right? If you make that choice, or if you make that pick of I want to quit. But here's how we challenge it though. The first one really is to challenge the negative thoughts. Challenge the negative thoughts of imposter syndrome. The second one is I touched on before and I said I would want to touch on now is self-compassion. Self-compassion. So challenge the negative thoughts, self-compassion, and embracing failure, or what we feel is failure or think of as failure, as growth.
Love it.
Change the narrative, right? And I feel if someone sitting between us right now knows most about how you really start thinking of failure as growth, because you touched on it 5 minutes ago, would be you. So what do you think about in the era, especially again of social media, in the world of entrepreneurship, where failure is going to be a lot more than, or what we think of as failure is going to be a lot more than success? How do you turn that failure into growth and take it to success?
Well, Zizu, unfortunately, bro, we've been brainwashed since we're kids that failure is bad, especially in literally in primary school, high school, whatever it is, just in school in general. It's just bad grades is you failed, And I kind of grew up with a failure mentality. I kind of grew up that I suck at school, that I can't get better in school, and I thought I was stupid, because this is what my teacher would like. You're not going anywhere in life, And I started shifting my focus to other things that it is fine to fail, like sports. So maybe this is why I loved sports. I always did sports. I competed, my childhood, my teenage life, even until today I compete, So I really think failure, what saved me is sports,
Wow.
Yeah. And in training every day we failed and you lost and you came back and all of this. In school, I really don't think they worked on that. Actually, they kind of really turned me off about education.
The
in
idea
general.
of coming back.
Just education. I didn't like education. And after I finished university, literally, I was like 23. This is where I start enjoying education. When I finished university and I graduated and everything, and I started learning and reading, and I learned about marketing, and I learned about this is where I really start enjoying education. Before, education was was punishment.
Yeah.
It was literally punishment, So if we change that, and if we're able to save our young brothers and sisters, if you guys have brothers and sisters or even kids in your household, make sure to change that. I promise you, it will change their life.
So change the narrative.
100%.
Change the narrative of failure, of how you perceive failure, and then that's what will turn it into growth, and growth will turn it into success.
100%.
And that's why I want to touch on a point now that will also take me to compassion, but will play a big role in embracing failure as growth. And I want to speak about that point because it's so important in psychology, and I love that point. Ever since I've learned it, it's changed my life completely, even dealing with the small, simple stuff that I'm going to give an example today. Between every action and its reaction, there is your perception in the middle. We forget that. We dismiss that. So we think it's a straight line from action to reaction. We think it's a straight line from our action to our reaction, or a straight line from your action to my reaction. And we forget that there is a point in the middle that we need to implement, we need to rebirth. And the only way to rebirth that and re-implement that is to remind ourselves of it. And that's perception. So between the action and its reaction is perception. And what I mean by that is, I'm trying to call Yusuf Sabri right now, over and over and over again, and he's not picking up. He's not picking up once, twice, 3 times, and I really want to speak to him. You know, I want to see him tonight. So how I perceive that will determine how I react to it. I could perceive that as Yusuf Sabri is he doesn't want to pick up my phone calls. He's trying to avoid me. He doesn't want to see me anymore. He doesn't like me. He's so fake with me. When he sees me, he's good. But when he's not with me, he's not picking up. That turns me to a whole other reaction of anger.
And it was just a tarawih, bro.
Exactly. and that turns the whole idea of the reaction to anger, resentment, sadness, you know, those emotions. But I could perceive that in a whole other way. Yusuf Sabri is praying. Yusuf Sabri is busy with family, busy talking with work. Yusuf Sabri isn't paying attention to his phone. He didn't see my phone call. He didn't see my text. I could perceive that. If it's true or not true, that is until we are sure of it, is not important.
100%.
So until you have seen it with your own eyes, until you are sure of it, Yusuf has told me, or I've seen it with my own eyes, if it's true or not is not important, because I'm not going to be sure of it, right? So how I perceive it will change my reaction. Then if I perceive it in that positive way, my reaction would be calmness, you know, happiness, peace. When I see him, I see him. When he calls me back, he calls me back. It's okay. I understand. And that's what I mean by every action and its reaction. It's perception, where with failure, it's the same thing.
100%.
On your journey of dealing with imposter syndrome, or on your journey of walking the yellow brick road, or that road that's less walked, or trailblazing, you know, if it's just for, you know, micro purposes, your family, your friends, or if you're trailblazing for a country, for a whole side of the world, and so on, then you need to change the narrative of failure. And to change the narrative of failure, you need to change your perception of failure. And the way we change our perception of failure is to stay in the present. We think that when we fail, when we stumble, we have failed because of something we've done in the past, and it will affect something we will do in the future. But we are never focused on what are we gonna do about it now to make sure that now is okay, that now is growth, that now will lead to success, right? We are not worried about that. So when I go through a bad match in training camp for a fight, the only thing I'm worried about is how that will affect the fight. Because I did so bad today, I'm not going to do well at the fight. I'm so close.
Complete insanity.
Yeah, I'm so close to the fight. I did bad today. It will affect my fight. And I did bad today because I did bad last week. So I let it affect. That is not the case. You know, the case is you did bad. Take that stumble, turn it into growth. Why did you do bad? Why do you think you did bad? And did you actually do bad? So how did it happen? Why did it happen? And did it actually happen?
Yeah.
You need to challenge those thoughts in imposter syndrome.
100%.
Take that as growth from the whys and the hows. Take those pieces as growth, as why you will make sure you will improve on it the next time. And when I say next time, I don't mean the next time you spar or the next time you attempt it. One of the attempts, one of the next times, you will improve.
I'm thinking, Zizu, I'm thinking about, imagine if you had that mindset in your fight and you lost a round. And you're
That's
like,
exactly how it is, yeah.
Like, take me through that. Like, give me the two scenarios.
So this is why in professional boxing, it's so important to step up the rounds, right? The more rounds you have, so many people think it gets a lot harder because of what you have to manage, the stamina you have to manage, or the training you have to put in, the conditioning you have to work on, and you have 12 rounds of boxing, when really the more rounds you start fighting, you start at 4 rounds, you work your way to 6, 8, 10, and 12. So the more rounds you have, the simpler it starts to become. And the more rounds you have, the easier it starts to become mentally, and so on and so on. Of course, it's a difficult sport and a hard sport, but the more rounds you have, the more time you have to have a strategy, the more time you have to make up for the mistakes, the more time you have to stick to the plan, the more time you have to implement the plan. And that's why when challenging imposter syndrome, it's always very important to think that time is your ally. Time is your ally. Think that time is your ally. Believe that time is your ally, because if you think and believe that, then you will have so much calmness, so much peace, and calmness in chaos. Even if it's so chaotic around you in the present moment, if you feel like you have time, you will be calm in the moment regardless of what's happening around you. And that's what you say. If you lose a round, you have 11 other rounds to make up for it. If you lose 5 rounds, you have 7 more, right? So it's that way of thinking about. Even if I think of what I'm stumbling in as failure, I take it in as growth. What I did that round that caused me to lose the round, I cannot do the next round. If I lose the next round because of something else, that's okay. If I lose the one after because of something else, that's okay. If I lose 2 consecutive rounds because of the same mistake, but I'm making less mistakes of it in the second round, that's also okay. You know? But don't make the same amount of mistakes the same exact way for 2 consecutive rounds. That's a bad corner. That's a bad fighter, right? So you have to take what you've done wrong in one round and do it better and better and better. And eventually, in one of the rounds, you start perfecting it. Eventually, in one of the rounds, you start doing it better and better. And that's why it's so important to just stay in the present, change that narrative, have that perception of looking at the cup half full than half empty when you're thinking of and challenging imposter syndrome.
Love it.
So that's what brings me to my last point and ties everything together when wanting to deal with imposter syndrome, knowing how to manage imposter syndrome, and just going through these emotions of that horrible feeling of feeling like you are a fraud for what's to come, or you are a fraud for everything you've done to get here. And it's very important to develop and embrace authenticity, right? Embrace authenticity. And when we speak about authenticity, we need to speak and when we speak about authenticity, we need to speak about how the role of feedback and validation plays into that whole circle of authenticity. So being around social media played a big part in my career with the role of the feedback and seeking validation and seeking feedback to what you are doing or what you are achieving, what you've achieved so far, what you feel you want to achieve, how you're going to achieve it. You are always seeking validation deep down, on the back of your head. You're seeking that validation, you're seeking that feedback to see if you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. So in the area of social media, in the area of entrepreneurship, how did you manage the idea of, how did you manage and stop, if you stopped it, the idea of seeking validation to prove, your success? How did you develop that authenticity of, like you said, I've proved to myself that I've done it, and I know that I've done it before, so I can speak about it, and so on, without think about that feedback and validation from other people, or maybe a specific type of people?
Because in the end of the day, like there are specific people that matter.
Exactly.
You know, for me, you know, and it could be to the silliest thing. You know, I bought a new outfit, and I want my sister to tell me, "Yo, 6 shoes," you know, and that's it. That's all I care. Let's say I have trillions of followers, and they all just like, no, I'm waiting for my sister to send me the screenshot of my picture and tell me like, yo, your shoes looks really cool. So I think it's really about the people that really matter to you, and that goes to really getting to know yourself.
Exactly, and develop that authenticity, and that's part of developing that authenticity when it comes to imposter syndrome. So the feelings and the emotions that you get from relying too much on the validation or the approval or the feedback from others is you start depending on their approval for you to do something, or depending on their approval before you do something.
It's so funny. You just described what social media is.
That's exactly.
Likes.
That's exactly what social media is.
That's what the likes are, bro.
And that just creates so many things, right? So start depending on their approval before you do something. You start depending on their approval if you want to do something, and you start depending on that approval. And sometimes if you don't get it from people that don't matter, you don't do it, right? You don't do it if you want.
You just like, because now I was just thinking about the pictures. Like if someone posts a picture, I'm like, you could see their mood if they didn't get the amount of likes, and even if they have like 2,000 followers, but they're like supposed to get 200 likes, they only got 50. You can see their mood. Not only that, you can take it to the other level.
They're not gonna post that picture again.
They're probably gonna delete it, but not even like something that's even more messed up for me. It's when people, let's say, are going out or they're doing some type of activity, and they're gonna post about their activity on their stories and something, and they're waiting for the reply, for the praises, that wow, this is so fun what you're doing, and they're not gonna have fun until, and if they don't get it,
they get those comments.
Yeah, and if they don't get it, they're probably not going to have fun. They're going to try to do different thing to get that validation, and they're not in the moment. And when I see this, it really amazes me, bro. It really, really amazes me. And this is one of the reasons why I was never able to become an influencer and make money from like campaigns and things like this, and travel as an influencer and so on. Because when you go, you're not really enjoying the moment. But this is for work, it's different, but those habits, you kind of take them on in your regular day-to-day life.
You start approaching life as ticking the boxes, rather than enjoying the moments that lead to ticking the boxes.
And you can't tell me like on the majority of influencers that they don't get caught in this and they get stuck. They can't really run away from it.
Yeah, I think that social media plays a big part. Definitely in imposter syndrome, and even if you think that eliminating social media is going to eliminate imposter syndrome, that's not the way to do it either. You have to manage it.
But the opposite is even worse. I feel, Zizou, is that you're taking these likes and praises as reality and building your self-confidence on this. Like I feel this is a whole podcast by itself.
That's exactly. That's the dependency of approval. And that's what brings me to my next point of really dealing with imposter syndrome and the role of feedback and the role of validation and how it plays into imposter syndrome of when you depend on that approval. When you take that approval and you fuel yourself with that approval, if it's negatively or positively, right? If it gets you doing something, or if it stops you from doing something, it leaves you vulnerable to manipulation. That's another point that the role of feedback and the role of validation does, is it creates that vulnerability to manipulation. You're very easily manipulated by either the approval you're getting or the approval you're not getting, the validation you're getting or the validation you're not getting. That can stop you from doing something that will lead you to huge success, or it will get you doing something that might later on lead you to huge failure, the right to a huge step backward. And that's what, again, the role of validation and the role of seeking that feedback can do, is that it leaves you really vulnerable to being manipulated by that. And I think a good quote by Anthony Joshua, actually, funny enough, is he said, don't let failure get to your heart and don't let success get to your head.
Love it.
That's what I love most about this quote. So don't let the failure get to your heart. Don't take the failure personally. Don't let it stop you, upset you, depress you. And don't let the success get to your head like, I've done this, I've done that, so I don't need to do this and do that. And when you are easily manipulated because of always seeking validation or always seeking approval to base your success on, and to try to, not only does it create a huge amount of that feeling of being a fraud or being an imposter or having imposter syndrome when you don't get the validation, when you don't get the feedback, but it also gives you such a fragile self-esteem, a very weak kind of self-esteem, very weak self-confidence, where you feel, that you don't have it in yourself to pick yourself up from those failures. You don't have it in yourself to pick yourself up from the feeling of being a fraud, or to pick yourself up from the small setbacks you might get on the journey to success. And so that is why it's very important to focus on authenticity, to just challenge those feedbacks, challenge those approvals, challenge those validations that in the back of your head you're always going to be wanting, you're always going to be feeling. It's very unrealistic to say completely eliminate that or completely blind yourself to that, right? But challenge the negative ones and challenge the positive ones too, but it's very important to challenge the negative ones. Like you said, who is it coming from? How much do they know? And how do they know it? Is it true or is it not true? And I'll give a very good example about that before we close off, and that is, as a fighter right now, someone can judge my performance in a fight based on how much they like a specific style. I don't display that style. I still win. I still put on my performance, but because they don't like my specific style and they favor another style, if I have an offensive style but they favor a defensive one, or if I have a defensive one but they favor an offensive one, then they will judge my performance based on how they like and how they view their own taste in boxing. But what does that person know about what the coach has told me in the corner in between the round? What does that person know about the 8 weeks that I've put in camp in preparing for that specific opponent, for that specific fight, developing a specific style for that fight? What does that person judging me know? What does that person judging me know? And how much does that person who is judging me based on my performance and on my journey really know about what they're talking about? So if this is a very important idea of give people only as much as they deserve. Give people only as much as they deserve to know. Give people only as much as they deserve and have earned out of you. So if I've given the person who is judging me, the general fan, they only know, and I've given them only 20% of my life, 10% of my life, and that is fight night. The night of the fight, that's all you know, that's all I've given you. How I'm emotionally stable, how I'm mentally stable, how I'm physically stable on fight night. That's all you know. So if you only know and I've only given you and shown you 10%, then you only get to judge 10%. I don't take it to heart because you only know 10%. You don't know the rest. So it's very important to be authentic. It's very important to develop that authenticity of the failures are mine, The success is mine. The journey is mine. I don't compare myself to another person, even if they are on a similar or the same journey as mine. They are a different person with a different mindset, with a different mentality. And if they achieve something earlier than I do, or if they achieve something later than I do, it doesn't mean that I won't achieve it later on, or I've achieved it too early. It doesn't mean any of it. Or on your own journey, you are not a fraud, you are a work in progress. And that is the end of the episode, the end of the Inner Guidebook episode of Imposter Syndrome. A long episode, but I feel a very good one. A very good one.
I think this is the best. The best. Every episode, I'm going to say this one was the best. Yes. So this one is the best.
This one.
No, I love it. I really, really love it, bro. I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Zizou.
Nah, Habibi, bro. A lot of people go through it and they don't know they're going through it, and this is who this episode is for. Especially for the people who don't know what they're going through. I hope now they don't. I hope they know how to get out of it, how to challenge it, and how to really develop that self-confidence, self-compassion, self-esteem, and awareness, and how to compare everything we spoke about here with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I really love this episode, guys. If let us know in the comments if ever you struggle with imposter syndrome. What do you do? What kind of imposter syndrome comes to you? How do you resolve it, or does it really get to you? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to read your feedback. And guys, don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel and his podcast if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms. That's it, guys.
And I'll see you in the next one.